All right, before we dive in, let me set the tone properly. This isn't one of those loud, flashy stories that lights up social media for 12 hours and then disappears. This is the opposite. This is the kind of thing that slips out late on a Friday afternoon, quietly uploaded, barely noticed, and then slowly starts rearranging the chessboard while everyone else is laughing at memes. And if you care about silver at all, own it, trade it, stack it, or just want to protect your purchasing power in 2026, this is something you need to hear all the way through. Quick pause, and yes, I'm going to ask for support right out of the gate. If you find value in this kind of deep dive work, help me out. Subscribe and drop OG John AG in the comments. My analytics tell me most people watching aren't subscribed, which is wild considering how much time goes into this research. If you want this channel to keep cutting through the noise instead of copying it, that support actually matters. Now let's get into it. Late Friday afternoon, 4:47 p.m. Eastern to be exact, a revised mineral assessment quietly went live on a U.S. government website. 89 pages long. Charts, tables, footnotes, geological terminology that could cure insomnia by page 3. This isn't the kind of document anyone shares on social media for fun, but buried in the middle of it, just one paragraph, changes how you should think about silver going forward. The report focuses on a deposit in far northern Greenland. We're talking Arctic Circle territory. Ice, isolation, military installations, and not much else in the public imagination. But updated testing revealed silver concentrations that were either missed or underestimated before. And the scale they're talking about isn't incremental. It's not nice to have. It's the kind of number that forces governments, not just markets, to pay attention. The estimate comes in around 2 billion troy ounces of silver in a single deposit. Let that sit for a second. Global mine production last year was somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 to 900 million ounces. So you are looking at roughly 2.5 years of total global supply sitting in one place, in one politically sensitive region. That alone is enough to matter. Where it's located makes it explosive. Here's what tightens the plot. The sampling window for this assessment runs from last summer into early fall, June through October. That means the data has been largely finalized for months. Yet the public upload happens mid-January, right as Greenland is back in the headlines, right as Washington ramps up pressure on Europe, right as tariffs and strategic territory language start flying again. Do you really believe that timing is just coincidence? I don't. Not every detail has to be scripted for the pattern to matter. Now, before anyone says, okay, interesting story, but what does this have to do with the price I see on my phone? This is where things get real. The silver price most people track is a paper price. Futures. Contracts that rarely result in actual metal changing hands. That system works as long as participants believe the paper price is a reasonable proxy for physical reality. But that belief has been under strain lately, and developments like this Greenland deposit don't relieve the pressure, they add to it. On Friday, futures closed in the low to mid-90s per ounce. That's the number splashed across apps and tickers. But if you try to buy real metal, the kind you can hold, ship, store, you're not paying that price. You're paying that price plus a premium. And those premiums are no longer behaving politely. I've been checking dealer inventories, comparing listings, and talking with people who actually move physical product. Government minted coins? Premiums are thick. Eagles, maples, the whole category. Even generic rounds aren't cheap in the way they should be in a calm market. When premiums stretch like this, it's not about convenience or branding. It's a stress signal. Retail is just the surface. Underneath, the wholesale market starts to fracture. And that's when the paper price gets uncomfortable, because the price that clears real supply begins to drift away from the futures. Quote, here's something I can't screenshot for you, but it came from someone who deals directly with Arctic logistics, shipping into remote northern ports, supplying operations in Canada, Alaska, and yes, the Greenland corridor. He told me physical silver quoted for delivery into certain Arctic nodes is being discussed at levels that look ridiculous if all you watch is COMEX. Numbers north of $130 an ounce. One quote he mentioned was $137. Think about that gap. Paper at roughly $93. Delivered physical at $137. That's a 40-plus premium. That's not a tight market. That's regional pricing driven by access, security, and control. That's silver starting to behave less like a generic commodity and more like a strategic material. And once that shift starts, it doesn't politely reverse. This is where Greenland stops being a punchline and starts being a pressure point. The Arctic is being repriced in real time. Shipping lanes are opening, resource maps are being updated, technology demand keeps climbing. Countries are waking up to the fact that future choke points aren't just in the Middle East. They're in the north. Silver sits right in the middle of this. Electronics, solar panels, EVs, medical applications, defense systems, it's not optional, it's required. So when a report points to 2 billion ounces in one place, that place becomes leverage. Let's talk about the deposit itself for a moment, because the details matter. The report describes average grades in the hundreds of grams per ton. In mining terms, that's already impressive. Push beyond that, and you're talking about something exceptional. Combine high grades with a massive rock body, billions of tons, and you get an in-ground silver figure that reaches into the billions of ounces. Add companion metals like zinc, and the economics improve further. Silver is often produced as a byproduct, so a strong base metal story can make a project far more viable, especially if governments are willing to step in with infrastructure support. Ports, airstrips, power, security, those aren't small details. They're control mechanisms. And that's the real fight. It's not just about digging silver out of the ground. It's about who sets the rules, who finances access, who grants export permissions. Because once you control those levers, you control output, whether the mine ramps up next year or a decade from now. Markets don't wait 10 years to react to that kind of shift. They move when the future changes. Zoom out, and the silver market was already tight before this. Persistent supply deficits, demand outpacing mine output, the gap filled by draining above-ground inventories, vaults, ETFs, government stockpiles, private holdings. Every year that deficit continues, the margin for error gets thinner. Industrial demand isn't slowing. Solar keeps growing. EVs aren't disappearing. Grid upgrades, electronics, medical applications, they all consume silver. Mine supply, meanwhile, doesn't magically surge. Most silver comes as a byproduct, so even higher prices don't instantly create more metal. New projects take years, sometimes a decade. Now drop a massive Arctic deposit into the middle of a geopolitical tug of war. That's when pricing stops being purely economic and starts being political. And when pricing turns political, paper markets struggle to keep control. Behind closed doors, the thinking is straightforward. Washington sees leverage, secure future access, protect supply chains, strengthen negotiating power. Beijing sees the same math from the opposite side. If one side gains influence, it can prioritize domestic industry and pressure rivals through pricing and availability. If neither side gains full control, uncertainty alone drives hoarding and stockpiling and higher prices. I'll leave you with a question, because your answer reveals how you're positioning yourself. Do you think Greenland ultimately leans toward Washington, toward Beijing, or tries to play both sides as long as possible? That choice shapes the silver market for the next decade. And remember, when retail premiums stretch and regional pricing breaks away from futures, the message is simple. The screen price is lagging reality. Let's take a step back and slow this down, because this is where people usually miss the signal. Premiums don't all mean the same thing. When premiums rise a little, that's normal demand doing what demand does. When they rise sharply, that's stress showing up in public. But when premiums blow out while inventories are thin, delivery times stretch, and dealers start getting cagey with quotes that's something else entirely. That's the market quietly admitting that the paper price is behind reality. I'm not saying futures markets vanish overnight. They won't. What I am saying is that they lose authority when real-world transactions start clearing at wildly different prices depending on where you are. One number in New York, another in London, another in Shanghai, and a completely different universe in the Arctic. At that point, you don't have a single global market anymore. You have pricing zones. And once that happens, the official quote stops being a true clearing price and starts functioning more like a suggestion. Now, I already know the pushback that's coming because I've heard it 1,000 times. Government reports get revised all the time. True. Not every discovery turns into a mine. Also true. Greenland is remote, cold, expensive, and politically complicated. Absolutely true. But none of that removes the strategic impact, because the strategic impact doesn't come from production next quarter. It comes from future control. Even if it takes 10 years to build, the country or coalition that secures the rights today shapes expectations, supply planning, and bargaining power for years before the first ounce ships. And that future market is heading straight into a demand wall. Now let's talk logistics, because this is where the Greenland story stops sounding like a normal mining project and starts sounding like something else entirely. This deposit is far north, cold, dark for months at a time, ice-choked fjords most of the year. There are no roads, no ports, no grid, no supporting infrastructure. Everything would have to be built from scratch. Deepwater ports, heavy cargo runways, all-weather roads, massive power generation, processing facilities, worker housing, medical infrastructure, environmental systems, security. This isn't just a mine, it's an industrial colony. Projects like that don't happen because someone ran a spreadsheet and liked the IRR. They happen when someone is willing to write a very large check for reasons that go beyond profit. National security is usually the accelerant. And that's where the geopolitical chain reaction comes in. If this Arctic silver story gains traction publicly, the first movers won't be retail investors. There'll be governments and industrial buyers. Quiet calls get made, supply gets discussed, forward contracts get locked in, and when that happens, the wholesale market tightens fast. That's what pushes premiums higher. That's what stretches delivery schedules. That's what makes paper silver start to feel theoretical. So let me walk you through this the way I'm thinking about it in scenarios, because that's how you stay ahead instead of reacting. Scenario 1, Washington secures the relationship. Greenland aligns more closely with U.S. interests, and mineral rights effectively fall under Western control. In the short term, paper traders might actually sell the news. They'll argue future supply is coming. You could even see a dip on the screen, but nothing gets physically easier for years. Premiums stay elevated. And internationally, countries that fear future exclusion start bidding aggressively for what they can secure now. Regional premiums don't calm down, they widen. Scenario 2, Beijing gains preferred access. Infrastructure financing, logistics influence, long-term supply agreements. China feels more secure. The West does not. US and European manufacturers, especially in defense and advanced tech, start scrambling. And when industrial buyers scramble, it doesn't look like a polite bid. It looks like a stampede. Contracts get pulled forward. Spot availability evaporates. Physical pricing detaches even further from futures. Scenario 3, no clear winner. Greenland and Denmark slow walk everything. Partial agreements, conditional deals, delays, ambiguity. This, by the way, is the most common early outcome in big power struggles involving small players. When you're sitting between giants, you don't choose quickly. You extract concessions from everyone. And uncertainty like that is rocket fuel for strategic metals. Nobody wants to be the one caught without supply if the music stops. And that brings me to a question I want you to think about, honestly. If the world moves toward regional pricing, would you rather own physical silver in your possession or paper exposure in an account that assumes smooth global delivery? There's no right answer for everyone, but how you answer tells me how you're thinking. Now zoom back out to the bigger picture. The silver market was already running hot before Greenland entered the conversation. Persistent deficits, demand consistently exceeding mine supply, above-ground inventories quietly filling the gap, solar, EVs, grid hardening, defense technology, medical uses. None of those trends are reversing. And silver doesn't have an easy supply response because most of it comes as a byproduct. You don't just flip a switch and flood the market with new metal. Greenland doesn't solve that problem. It complicates it. Concentrated future supply in a contested region doesn't calm markets. It encourages hoarding. Because when supply becomes a chess piece, nobody wants to sit there without pieces. Here's something most channels won't say clearly, so I will. The spot price is not your price. Your price is your local price. It's shaped by inventory, demand, dealer risk, delivery time, and perceived future scarcity. If you think silver is only $93 because that's what an app says, but you can't actually buy it anywhere near that level, you're kidding yourself. Markets don't care about screens. They care about availability. We also need to talk about the narrative war because it's coming. As this story gets wider attention, you'll see two dominant tones. One is ridicule, Greenland as a joke, ice, polar bears, nothing burger. The other is reassurance, plenty of silver, no problem here. Both narratives serve the same function, keep people calm, passive, and anchored to paper. Because the system depends on confidence. Confidence that paper can become metal if needed. Once that confidence cracks, premiums stop being noise and start being the headline. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to help you think clearly. Clear thinking in 2026 means watching what insiders do, not what headlines say. And insiders are buying future control. They're funding infrastructure, they're making quiet deals, and they're paying premiums in places cameras don't point. There's another angle worth considering. Even if this Greenland deposit becomes a mine years from now, the process of developing it changes the region. Roads get built, ports get built, power gets built. And once infrastructure exists, other deposits suddenly become viable. Rare earths, uranium, base metals. Greenland could turn into a full resource corridor, and when corridors open, politics shift permanently. I'm not here to hand out tickers or tell you to buy this or sell that. That's not the game. What I will tell you is how I'm framing it. Layers, core physical exposure, selective minor exposure if you understand the risks, and constant attention to political negotiations, because headlines will move this market faster than drill results. And don't make decisions as if this is 2018. It isn't. The world is moving toward resource nationalism, strategic stockpiles, friendly supply chains, rivals paying extra. In that environment, silver stops behaving like a sleepy commodity and starts acting like a pressure valve. Quick detour, because I promised value. If you like silver but also enjoy hearing real-world success stories, regular people making smart, disciplined moves, there's a link in the description to a separate channel focused on that. If that's your thing, check it out. Back to timelines, because this matters. You don't wait for a mind to open to understand what happens next. You watch the next 30 days. First, niche finance communities amplify the report. Analysts start connecting dots. Volatility follows, because markets hate surprises. Second, mainstream outlets pick it up through a geopolitical lens, not a pricing one. Flags, icebergs, dramatic maps. No explanation of futures versus physical. No discussion of premiums. That's where being early matters. Third comes the industrial response. That's when real tonnage gets locked up, inventories drain, and premiums refuse to go back to normal. There's also the environmental wildcard. Mining in the high Arctic will face resistance, some of it justified. But here's the uncomfortable reality. You can't electrify the world without mining. Solar panels don't appear by magic. EVs don't materialize out of thin air. Silver is essential. So society ends up stuck between higher prices and supply instability or uncomfortable extraction decisions. And when society can't decide, uncertainty lingers, and uncertainty is bullish for strategic metals. Finally, let's talk about that $131 Arctic number. Psychologically, it matters more than people realize. Once that number exists, even as a regional quote, it changes behavior. People stop thinking silver is under $100. They start thinking the real price is higher somewhere. That thought alone drives hoarding, raises dealer risk premiums, slows selling, and turns a tight market into a nervous one. And nervous markets don't stay quiet for long. There's one part of this whole story that genuinely makes me uneasy, and it's not the headlines or the commentary, it's the behavior of smart money. If this deposit is even remotely as large as the report suggests, the most sophisticated players won't sit around waiting for full confirmation. In strategy, waiting for perfect certainty is how you end up reacting instead of positioning. So they'll assume it's real until proven otherwise. They'll move early, they'll lock optionality, they'll lean on influence, and they just all try to shape the rules before the rest of the market fully realizes the board has been reset. Before I go deeper, I want to pause for something important. If you're doing well right now in any part of your life, I want you to share a small win in the comments. It doesn't have to be about silver, a business win, a promotion, paying off debt, hitting a savings goal, anything. There are people watching this who need proof that progress is possible in 2026. Well, one comment might do more for someone S mindset than you think. Now let's slow this down because Greenland can sound like political theater until you understand how silver is actually priced. At its core, silver pricing is built on confidence. Confidence that a paper contract can turn into real metal. Confidence that warehouse reports reflect deliverable ounces. Confidence that the world is still functioning as one unified market. As long as that confidence holds, a single chart can pretend to represent reality. When it cracks, the chart becomes a reference point, and the real price becomes whatever clears supply where you're standing. That's why premiums matter so much. They're not noise, they're the market speaking plainly. They're telling you that metal is tighter than the screen admits. And when a massive deposit appears in a contested region, that pressure doesn't ease, it intensifies. Because the moment governments and industrial buyers start thinking in terms of control, they stop behaving like shoppers and start behaving like planners. Planners don't wait for discounts. They build buffers. They lock contracts. They secure logistics. And you don't see that shift first on a futures chart. You see it in delivery delays, wholesale quotes, and widening regional price gaps. We've been here before, even if the details were different. In the 1970s, oil stopped being just oil. It became leverage, and prices didn't rise politely. In the 2010s, rare earths stopped being obscure minerals and turned into strategic choke points. Export rules changed, prices spiked, supply chains scrambled for years. The pattern is consistent. Essential material plus concentrated control leads to instability and higher real-world pricing. Silver fits that template far better than most people are willing to admit. This isn't just about coins and jewelry. Silver is solar paste, electronics, contacts, medical coatings, batteries, and defense systems. When future supply can be influenced by geopolitical power, the correct response isn't indifference, it's repositioning. Now let's go one layer deeper into logistics, because this is where the bidding war actually makes sense. A far north mine isn't just a mine. It's a permanent footprint. Ports, runways, roads, power plants, fuel depots, housing, telecom, emergency services. Whoever finances that infrastructure doesn't just help Greenland develop. They gain leverage over the artery that makes the region function. And control over the artery becomes control over exports, contracts, prioritization, and access. That's why you're seeing enormous numbers floated in back-channel discussions. Those figures aren't charity. They're the price of a strategic foothold. If I were sitting in Greenland's leadership seat, I'd do exactly what any disciplined negotiator would do. I'd let both sides bid. I'd demand better terms. I'd push for local revenue, local hiring, autonomy guarantees, and long-term protections. And I'd delay choosing as long as possible. That delay alone injects volatility, because markets hate uncertainty more than they hate bad news. That's the real cliffhanger here. Not whether a mine opens next year, but whether Greenland locks into an exclusive framework with anyone at all. The moment that happens, market psychology shifts. Here's a practical warning, and this part catches people off guard. If this story escalates, paper prices may look chaotic. Futures could swing violently up and down. Commentators will call it speculation. But at the same time, physical supply can remain tight because real metal moves through slow, expensive logistics. That's when confusion sets in. People see a dip on the screen, try to buy, and realize the dip doesn't exist in the real world. And once enough people experience that, behavior changes. They stop waiting for the perfect entry. They buy when metal is available. That's how slow pressure turns into sharp moves. If you want a simple way to gauge stress without complicated data, watch a handful of signals. Are delivery times stretching? Are the cheapest products disappearing first? Are premiums rising across multiple dealers simultaneously? Are buyback prices climbing relative to spot? Are local shops bidding aggressively because they know inventory won't sit? When several of those show up together, the physical market is telling you something the paper quote won't. I'll say this cleanly and professionally. If you're getting value here, the easiest way to support the work is to subscribe. And after the video, check the bonus links in the description, the premium WhatsApp channel, and the membership option. That's how we keep doing deep dives without turning every minute into an ad break. Now back to the real trigger. The it's over moment, start over moment for the old silver market, one to come with a drum roll. It'll arrive via a policy decision, a leaked memo, a midnight headline, or a quiet agreement released when markets are thin. The people who come out ahead are the ones who understood the setup before the headline hit. Jokes don't move supply chains. Agreements do, and they move them fast behind closed doors. This ties directly into something I've been warning about for months. A paper market can look stable right up until it isn't. The moment delivery stress shows up, inventory's thin, and big buyers decide to front-run each other, moves get violent. And the more the world treats silver as strategic, the less tolerant the system becomes of low prices. Low prices encourage hoarding. Low prices encourage stockpiling. Low prices encourage governments to lock supply. The natural outcome is upward repricing. Some of you will inevitably ask for a number, a target, a magic level. I'm not going to turn this into a lottery ticket. What I will say is this. When a metal transitions from commodity to strategic asset, it tends to overshoot. And in a fragmented market, price becomes a range, not a single number. Futures can trade at one level, while physical clears much higher depending on region. That's not a bold prediction. It's a pattern seen repeatedly in critical materials. There's another pressure point to watch closely. If negotiations intensify, exchanges respond. Margins get raised, rules get tweaked, cash settlement gets encouraged, all of it framed as stability. Those moves are not random. They're pressure valves. A physical run exposes leverage, and paper systems do not like leverage being exposed in public. So here's a short, practical checklist for this week. Watch for any official statements from Denmark about Greenland's resources. Watch for comments from Greenland's local government about foreign investment offers. Watch for headlines about ports, runways, power projects, or undersea cables. Watch for sudden broad premium increases across dealers. Watch for unusual inventory drawdowns from exchange warehouses. And pay attention to tone shifts in mainstream media. When coverage pivots from mocking Greenland to calling it strategic, that pivot is the tell. Let's circle back to the beginning, because it matters. People laughed at the idea of Greenland as a strategic asset. Nobody laughs at 2 billion ounces of silver. Nobody laughs when industrial supply chains are at risk. Nobody laughs when critical materials become leverage. The fact that this report surfaced now suggests one thing. The resource map is changing faster than the public narrative. To stay fully plugged in, remember the description includes bonus links, including the premium WhatsApp channel for fast alerts and the membership option for deeper research. We're now releasing members-only content regularly, and it's not recycled material. A separate research team is building those deep dives exclusively for the John AG community. Before we close, I want your take. If the gap between paper and physical keeps widening, what breaks first? Do premiums eventually normalize downward, or does the screen price snap higher to catch reality? Drop your view below. And if you've had trouble finding silver locally or noticed strange pricing where you live, share it. Ground level reports matter more than charts. One last thing. If you're doing well, financially, professionally, personally, share a quick success in the comments. We're building a community that stays sharp and stays hopeful, even when the world gets strange. Here's the big picture. Greenland isn't just ice, it's a chessboard. Silver isn't just a shiny metal. It's a strategic input for the next decade of energy, technology, and defense. And the global pricing system only works as long as people believe paper equals metal. When a massive deposit appears in a contested zone, that belief gets tested. When belief gets tested, premiums become signals, inventories become headlines, and power matters more than charts. So do this now. Subscribe. It takes a second. Hit like if you want continued updates on this story. and comment OG John AG so I know you're backing original work over copycats. The next 6 months are going to be volatile, and the people who win are the ones who recognize the shift before it becomes obvious. Stay sharp and take care of yourself.